Hi folks, Kevin here. Well, it's Sunday, May 6, 2018, and today I'm up in the First Food Forest, and I thought I'd take a little bit of time to review what I'm doing up here as far as something that I've neglected for a while, and that's doing pruning. Pruning of the fruit trees. I should start off by saying that my approaches have really changed over the years. Initially, when I first got some of these larger trees several years ago, like this plum tree, which has black knot on it that I'm going to be dealing with today, but the larger trees that I've had, I started pruning them pretty much like I had seen many videos on YouTube. And I realized that by doing a lot of heavy pruning and having a very busy life, you get all these water sprouts that end up being very big branches, and the trees get big, bushy, and taller, and get a lot of vegetative growth, but not as much fruit production. And certainly there's the approach that people have been teaching for years, either having an open vase shape or having more of a conical shape for your apple trees, and the open vase for your pitted species, the peaches, the apricots, the plums, and so on and all. So what I'm doing today is I'm doing some pruning. I'm doing some very heavy pruning because I haven't done it in a couple of years. These trees have been neglected, and we'll take a look at a tree right behind me here. Alright, so this is an apple tree that unfortunately I pruned a couple of years ago, and you see all these straight upright verticals just promoting lots and lots of vegetative growth here. And these are all 2 years old, I believe now, these big stems that are shooting up. When I pruned off some small ones, like this one here, hopefully this is showing, and this one here, these water sprouts took off just like some of the smaller, lower ones. And it's decreasing the airflow through the tree. It's decreasing the amount of sun, because once all of these branches leaf out, so we're not getting good airflow, we're not getting good sun exposure, so it's not an ideal situation. And by waiting so darn long, by pruning those now, it's difficult to even get the bypass pruners in there to get them down. So I've been negligent as far as taking good care of these trees, which means I get pretty radical in order to deal with it. And nowadays I'm doing much more training. So all the new trees, the ones in the, all these ones in these small tree tubes around, and the ones that you'll see me taking out of their tree tubes, they're getting trained as opposed to getting pruned so heavily. So last night I did come up, and this is one of the older apples. You can see I pruned it really heavily, but I want to make it so that it's much easier for me to manage in the future. Now, in the short term, it's going to be difficult because I am going to get some water sprouts that are going to come up. And this is not the ideal time of year to do a heavy pruning. This should have been done during the winter months. You can see on the ground there's lots of that's what I pruned last night. There's another one over here. So, not the ideal situation, but these are fairly hardy trees, and I just got to stay on top of it. Now, it'd be nice if just once every 2 weeks I came over and just took a gloved hand and just rubbed off the little water sprouts that are going to start to shoot up. I do that for 2 years and I'd be left with a beautifully shaped tree. Now, I want trees that are going to be real easy for me to harvest the fruit without getting up on ladders or using big poles and all. So the whole goal is training these younger trees as opposed to doing lots of pruning. Then we got this tree here with all the black knot on it. Of course, this is one of the plums. It's really been very, very productive. And see all those water sprouts that shot up. Really poor pruning job that I've done on this in the past, but I'm going to see if I could save it. I'll be pulling off all of these small areas. I hope this is showing up where the sap has oozed out some, because that's where the spores will set up shop and start to create more of the black knot as well. So I'll be scraping those off and try to get to these. But this is, you can see once this limb was taken off, you could see water sprout shooting right up, shooting towards the sky. So that's a bit of an issue. Now I'm going to save this tree after I get a couple more of these trees done. Sorry about the way the camera's looking here. And I'm going to try and make short work of all this. So what are the tools I'm going to use today? All right, so I brought Pepe out here. I sharpened up some tools. Certainly today, just about everything, since all of the limbs are viable, I'll be using bypass. Bypass just means they're like scissors. So these are pruners where they bypass. I gave them a nice little edge on all of these tools today. Let me see if I can. Now, this pair here is one that I use in the earth at times to cut roots and all, but I cleaned it up and sharpened it as well to get ready. I've got a couple of the long pole ones that help me to reach as well. Both of these. This one actually has a nice little grasper on the end of it. Well, this is an awkward camera angle and all, but I wanted to be able to show you some of the tools that I use. So this is a simple pair of bypass pruning shears. And geez, I guess it probably shows up better if against my chest background, the dark blue. I gave this a sharpening this morning and cleaned them up a bit. I've got some vinegar that I'll be using to clean them off regularly as I'm doing pruning. So this works really good for those really small little limbs that are coming out. I've got several different size loppers. Again, I cleaned these up a bit today. I don't know if you could see the edge that I put on all of the pieces of equipment. My small hand saw as well. This is a tool that I'll be using to cut off some of the larger limbs potentially. And larger sets of loppers. Some of them are somewhat geared to give you more of a fulcrum to make it easier to go ahead and get some of the larger limbs. Just an intermediate size. Again, a nice edge put on each one of these so they're really sharp. Then for those limbs that are difficult to get at, I have a really nice pole bypass pruner, and this works extremely well. And this one is just a simple, let me just step out of the way so you can see the tip of that. So this I think is a 4-footer or 5-footer, and it cuts them and it drops them, as opposed to this smaller one, which I think is a 3-footer. And again, these all help me to angle to get in to where I want to be. But the thing that's nice about this pair is when I'm getting, this is, if you're staying on top of your pruning, this is actually a nice tool to have because it has a small little grasper here. So when the bypass cuts off on this side, it cuts the limb off on this side, but on this side the jaw actually holds the piece that you've just cut off, and you can bring it down and whip it in, gently maneuver it so it isn't banging up against other buds and all. So this is one of those ones that works all through the summertime. If you're seeing these small little limbs coming up where it's going to be crossing and touching another branch or interfering with wind airflow, all of those are important. I'll show you one more tool I'm using today. And that's my cordless reciprocating saw. And I have blades that I only use for pruning, and that's when these limbs the water sprouts get almost half the size of my wrist. They get over 1 inch in diameter, something that I can't really get with my bypass pruners with any ease. And because they're so tight, it's difficult to actually get my saw into position as well. But that narrow blade, I can get in there as well. Now it's difficult because if you put this base plate up against it, if you don't hold it securely, it's going to damage some of boy, I hope this is showing up. It's going to damage some of the bark on the tree and create more injuries that have to be healed. And this is the wrong time of year. The wrong time of year to have that happen. So that isn't a tool that I recommend people use. It's just one of the tools that I found that makes it so that I can get through the job, get it done quickly, and reduce the amount of hours that I've got to spend pruning a couple hundred trees. And that's why I really encourage people that are starting their food forest to learn about training their trees as opposed to pruning them, because once you start pruning trees, you're destined to be pruning them the rest of your life. And that was the old way of doing things, and I think training the trees is potentially a much better way to reduce the amount of man hours or person hours that you're going to spend out there in the food forest. So I think I'll just get started here and see how things go. Okay, so I just got done pruning this apple tree, and yeah, I took quite a bit off. When you're first pruning like this, it looks crazy, and there's probably a lot of arborists or orchard workers that are looking at what I'm doing and thinking, man, this guy's nuts. He's butchering this tree. There weren't any dead limbs on this one, but anything that's damaged, and there were a couple of small lower ones that were damaged because of the deer coming through and munching on them. Or in some of them, they'll grab a hold of a limb and pull it down, or they'll do deer rub. All of those things do happen. So I remove any dead or significantly damaged. All of those ones that are feeding backwards. So in other words, I'm trying to get the limbs to go out to the sides so that it's really easy access for harvesting the fruit, and so that there's really good airflow and good solar exposure to all of the fruit that's on the limbs. I've made the mistake of pruning some of these ones too lightly and thinking, well, I'm going to get lots and lots of fruit off of it, where the fruit is so laden with weight that it creates so much weight that the limbs actually break. And that's a problem, especially with the peach trees and all, peaches and nectarines. So I really do prune these back pretty heavily, especially when I've done this. Now it'd be ideal if I came out here every couple of weeks and, like I said, with a gloved hand, rub them off. I'm going to get up close and show you a couple of the spots that now I did use the reciprocating saw. Hopefully the GoPro, I set it up for a time lapse. You'd be able to see I used that for a bit of it. But I use a few different types of the pruners during this process. But I'll show you what the injuries look like on the tree. Yes, it does look like pretty much a war zone here. Here's one that I pruned in the past. I'm hoping that shows up. I try to cut them close enough where there's still that collar, that rim of really types of cells that are going to create this circumferential constriction and seal off this area, where eventually it'll look like this area here. Hopefully that's showing up, where you can't even tell that limb was taken off. So this might be a little bit too far away from the collar. It will heal over. It would be ideal if I got a little bit closer, but this one is pretty much perfect. This is good. This one sent out a limb that was going up and going to cross with this and create rubbing action and doing more damage and making it more difficult to get at. So this will heal over at a point like this. You get it right next to that collar, similar to this one here. I damaged some of the bark tissue here that's going to heal and constrict around, but you could see I try to leave this tissue so that it will create a nice wound closure around each one of these sites and all. So, and some of them are tough, especially when there's been 2 or 3 water sprouts. So if I cut off a big one, like I've had to do here, now this is one where I use the reciprocating saw, and you can see there's 3 right next to each other here. This will heal over, it'll take time. This one was like one of the worst ones that I did, and you see it's going to take a few years for this to heal over. Maybe on this you could see there's still that ring of cells that are going to just gradually work their way right out and constrict and seal that injury off pretty darn well. So let's see, lots of the limbs on the ground here. These type of limbs here I'd run right over with the mower, but I may take them because I'm building a hugelkultur bed up front and use these as fill as well. Here we can see some of the horseradishes starting to come up as some of the other plants around the tree. Over in these trees here. Well, here we got comfrey coming up around these trees over in this area. Here we got thyme, more thyme. I believe that's lemon balm right here. And yes, there's some of the roots material here, so here's some more lemon balm there coming up. Lots of weed seeds coming up, so it'd be ideal if I could get some cardboard down and some wood chips on top of it. Here's one of the, dang it, this thing is just hosta berries here. I ended up putting all of the small bushy fruit trees inside of these because the deer, it will eat them right off to ground level each year if I don't do this. And I'll put a wire cage around it and prune it off and start some more bushes right from these, from the tops of these ones as well. They end up doing pretty well once we protect them from the deer. So that again is an apple. I've got quite a few more apples and peaches to do, and hopefully this all turns out well. So I hope this information was somewhat helpful. It certainly isn't the way that I'm hoping to go about taking care of the food forest in the future. I've adopted the technique of training the trees, trying to train them to grow out to the sides with little pruning. There is pruning that needs to be done. There's more of the training and using tie-offs to hold those limbs where we actually want them. And I think if we train the trees when they're pretty young, there's minimal pruning that needs to be done later on in life. And probably much less, all of these wounds, especially in your like your plum trees and your peach trees and nectarines, they're very susceptible to the fungal diseases. So those are, and the more injuries there are, there's more of the exudates that get exposed to the surface of the tree during the wound healing process. And as a result, there's more of a chance that they'll pick up these airborne spores that are just ubiquitous. They're every place. So I hope this was helpful. Please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, ask questions, leave comments. I certainly realize that this looks like a butchering job that I'm doing here, and I realize that. That's what you got to do when you're one guy trying to manage more than what you probably can handle on your own. So thanks so much for watching, folks. I really appreciate it, and have a fantastic day. Bye-bye now.